Hi, I'm Nick Shackleton-Jones. I'm Director of Learning and Performance Innovation at PA Consulting. And this is a 5-minute summary of a presentation that I delivered together with Charlie Kneen at the UN as a keynote, the Staff College, and secondly, at the Learning Technology Summer Forum. So basically it's about fixing learning and education. But first off, how would you do these things? These are all things that I've had to do fairly recently, with the possible exception of learning how to play Stairway to Heaven on a guitar. And typically when I ask people these questions, the answers are Google or YouTube or IMDb or something like that. But I've yet to hear anybody say classroom or e-learning. This is a problem because training is no longer working. Arguably it never worked in the first place. But certainly the world is changing, and the way that we get stuff done in our everyday lives no longer resembles how we get stuff done in organisations. This is a huge problem because organisations, whether they're public education or private organisations, are still soldiering on with these ineffective approaches to learning. So let's have a look at them in a bit more detail. So classroom is liked, but it's ineffective and it's expensive. What do I mean it's ineffective? Well, estimates vary, but something like 65% of information is lost within a couple of weeks, typically of a kind of a learning event. In the case of public education, people tend to cram for exams, so you get a kind of a spike before the exam, but then again it's kind of lost shortly thereafter. In the case of e-learning, it's disliked, it's equally ineffective, but it's cheap. What do I mean it's disliked? Well, if you look at Jane Hart's Learning in the Workplace survey, this is consistently rated as one of the most ineffective and poor ways to actually support people in their jobs. It's equally ineffective. US Department of Education meta-study found it was only marginally better than classroom, which means that it's not very good at all. But it's cheap, so organisations are buying it, but they're not actually seeing anything like the uplift in terms of performance, or even just in information retention that they're looking for. So what do we do? What can we do instead? Well, we can do two kinds of things. We can do experiences, or we can build resources. Experiences that simulate real challenges. Think about sort of building a flight simulator for any other kind of job. That's what experience design is really about. And then resources. Resources are kind of Google and YouTube. They're not primarily about learning. They're about just helping you get something done. They're about being available at the point of need, being useful. So experiences are about designing challenges and simulations that resemble everyday tasks. And you can link that through to kind of badges and help people develop a portfolio of capabilities. And resources are about designing digital resources that help people get the job done, help people at the point of need. And you don't do that by pushing content. It's not the same as micro-learning at all. So why these two things? Of all the sorts of things that we see floating around the world of learning, why experiences and resources? Well, to understand the significance of those two things, you really have to understand learning. So what is learning all about? Well, the affective context model explains that learning is not what we think it is. Learning is not remembering events or information. What actually happens is that we store our reactions to events or information, and we use those reactions or affective context to recreate the event or the information itself. And this is a fantastically powerful theory in terms of predictive or explanatory power. It explains all manner of things, from the unreliability of eyewitness testimony through to the fact that if you think back to your school days, you're far more likely to remember school dinners or friends or teachers, scary or caring, than you are the specific details of a history or geography lesson. So how does it work? Well, the basic idea is you start off with a fairly sort of undifferentiated set of reactions to things in the world around you. So you might see something that looks like this and be pretty terrified. But as you age, you develop a sophistication of micro-reactions. Don't think about affective context as kind of happy or sad. Those are kind of gross emotional states. Think of affective context as, if you like, an emotional retina, which picks up very subtle affective reactions that you have to things in the world around you. Different people, of course, have different feelings about different things. If you're somebody who knows a lot about trees, a train journey may have a very different significance. But you use this affective context, this is the important thing, to actually conjure up that information or that event later on. That's why it's never quite accurate. So how does this help us with understanding learning and education? Well, it suggests that there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum of things, from those things that have weak affective context, that people don't really care very much about, to stuff which has kind of strong affective context. And this really is what clickbait is. Clickbait is a technique which leverages things with strong affective context to try and get you to click on them. And what's really disappointing is when somebody comes home from school and you say, "How was your day?" and they say it was boring, because that effectively means that nothing really struck them as very interesting. But how can we flip this on its head? How can we make effective learning and effective education? Well, if we take that spectrum, it gives us two kinds of techniques. If people don't care about something on the left-hand side, then we can build an experience which makes them care, which adds effective context. In your organisation, there'll be things that people don't really care very much about. They may be data protection, they may be safety, they may be inclusivity. And as you probably know intuitively, if you want to shift people's behaviour around those things, you have to put them in a situation which makes them care. And that could be a simulation or an experience or a story. If they care about something, they'll accumulate the information. Where will that information be? In the form of resources. Because when people care about things in the way that you do, when you look things up on YouTube or Google, you don't expect an e-learning module, you just want the answer, and you're quite happy if that answer is in the form of text, or if the video quality isn't great. That's because you're pulling information, that's because you care, that's because you already have the effective context. So, at these two ends of the spectrum, we have these two kinds of things. Experiences that we can design to build effective context, to actually inspire people to learn, to provide that kind of pull and motivation. And on the other hand, at the other end of the spectrum, resources. Resources which support people at the point of need, enabling people to get the job done in organisations as if they were trying to get the job done outside organisations, using the same sort of approaches. How do you decide which one to do, though? And how do you decide what to build? Well, the thing you mustn't do, above all else, is just gather up content and just push it out at people. We've been doing that for decades and it's never been effective. You know, we've got new starters, we've got leaders. Let's scoop up some content from some kind of expert and sort of spray it at people, and then hide the fact that it doesn't really work. Let's do something completely radically different. Let's use a model like the 5DI where we actually talk to people, we talk to the audience, and we understand the concerns and tasks that underpin their performance. We say, what are the things that are driving your activity, are motivating you, you're worried about today, and what are the sorts of things you're having to do? And then you can build experiences and you can build resources which really help them get the job done and make a really big difference. We've done this time and time again. It works every time. And so user centricity, really understanding what's driving learning and performance in organisations, and designing backwards, or bottom up if you like, makes a huge difference. Not the technology won't save you, user centricity will. So in summary, 4 things we learned. Shift the focus from kind of trying to push information at people towards making an organisation usable. Imagine that, how much more performance and engagement you get from people if your organisation was as usable as an iPad is. Anybody could just pick it up and start performing. Organisations should build resources, not courses. Most of the performance and engagement uplift you're going to see will come from building resources that help people get the job done, that they can use at the point of need. Everything that you create, ask yourself, what specific task is this going to help somebody with? And if you can't answer that question simply, then probably you're just dumping content on people. And educators should build challenging experiences. If we really want to transform education, it's about simulating the tasks that people have to do and allowing them to draw in the information that relates to those tasks. So if somebody's really passionate about alleviating third world debt, then the economics, the geography, the other stuff will come attendant on those challenging experiences, on trying to solve those problems. And finally, design with your audience, for your audience. That's what user centricity is all about. And that's it. Thank you very much.